People keep saying that artificial intelligence is turning us into the stupidest generation in human history. They look at automated essays, instant answers, and lazy text generators, claiming our brains are turning to mush. But that misses the bigger picture. The real danger facing our society right now isn't the technology itself, it's what cognitive scientists call the silent crisis of critical thinking. We have entered an era where anything can be faked, and a lie can look, sound, and feel exactly like the truth. In a world where machines can process information faster than any human, independent judgment is no longer just a soft skill, it is the only asset that actually matters. To understand how high the stakes have truly become, look no further than an unbelievable event that took place in January of 2024. A routine finance employee at a multinational firm in Hong Kong received an urgent message from his chief financial officer. The CFO needed a massive, confidential wire transfer of $25 million. Now, to his credit, the employee thought it smelled fishy. He practiced what most people would consider due diligence. He refused to transfer the money based on a mere email and instead requested a video conference to confirm the order. The CFO agreed, hopping onto a live video call alongside several other familiar team members. They walked the employee through the verification process step by step. Relieved and proud of himself for double-checking, the employee authorized the transaction. Days later, the company discovered a terrifying reality. Every single person on that video call, from the CFO to the colleagues, was a hyperrealistic deepfake generated from public internet clips. The money was gone forever. We used to say we were looking for a needle in a haystack. Today, the challenge is entirely different. You are forced to find a single real needle in a massive haystack of identical, perfectly engineered fake needles. What shields us from this fog is critical thinking, yet human judgment is constantly hijacked by 5 hidden cognitive distortions every single day. The first major distortion comes from our evolutionary blind spot for authority, beautifully illustrated by the rise and catastrophic fall of the medical tech startup Theranos. Founded by Elizabeth Holmes, a charismatic 19-year-old Stanford dropout, Theranos promised to revolutionize healthcare by running hundreds of medical tests using just a single drop of blood. Capitalists and politicians swooned. At its peak, the company was valued at $9 billion. Holmes was hailed as the next Steve Jobs. She wore black turtlenecks, spoke in an unnaturally deep, authoritative baritone voice, and rarely blinked during high-stakes presentations. She surrounded herself with a legendary board of directors featuring former secretaries of state, retired 4-star generals, and iconic CEOs. Because of this overwhelming aura of authority, brilliant billionaire investors threw hundreds of millions of dollars at a ghost. They fell victim to the halo effect, assuming that because someone is powerful and credentialed, they must be right. Nobody bothered to ask if these political figures actually understood blood chemistry. Nobody broke through the veil of secrecy when technical inquiries were answered with meaningless word salads about chemical reactions generating signals. Investors allowed fear of missing out and raw confidence to blind them. The fundamental mistake was that they forgot to ask the single most disarming question in the critical thinker's toolkit: what needs to be true for this to be real? If they had forced themselves to look for the baseline scientific evidence required to back up the claim, the $9 billion illusion would have shattered instantly. But these psychological magic tricks aren't just limited to massive corporate frauds. They are played on us by brilliant marketers and corporate lawyers every single hour through a psychological concept often referred to as true lies. Corporations rarely lie directly anymore. They don't have to. Instead, they have mastered the dark art of linguistic gymnastics. Take a close look at how tech giants launch luxury products. They look into the camera and say, "Today, we are raising the bar with an all-new device that is unlike anything we have ever created before." If you listen critically, they didn't actually say anything of substance. All they said was that they made a new thing, which is exactly what the word new means. These are empty, edible word noodles. They manipulate us using highly calculated qualifiers. Think about the phrase "up to." A telecom provider promises internet speeds up to 1 gigabit per second, or a battery that lasts up to 36 hours. If your battery dies in 2 hours or your internet crawls at a snail's pace, they still told the absolute truth, because 2 hours is mathematically up to 36. Look at credit card companies offering rates as low as 0%. It sounds like a dream, but it's a trapdoor. Miss a single deadline, and that interest rate instantly spikes to a compounding 24%. Look at the automotive industry advertising a vehicle starting at $37,000. But if you actually want all-wheel drive, the software-activated or basic safety features, the price tag quietly balloons to $55,000. To survive this barrage of manicured, curated deception, weaponize the question mark move. The moment you hear a shiny, legally sanitized corporate claim, mentally repeat it to yourself with a question mark slapped onto the end. When an ad boasts clinically proven to work up to 8 times faster, pause and ask, up to 8 times faster. Compared to what exactly? A broken machine. The second you apply that question mark, you cut through the marketing calories and expose the critical gap between the promise and the actual product. Even if you successfully fend off authority figures and corporate marketers, you still have to face an even more insidious force, the terrifying weight of groupthink. There is a legendary psychological study known as the Asch conformity experiments. Researchers placed a single real participant in a room with 7 other people who they believed were fellow participants, but were actually hired actors. The researcher showed the room a single line, and then presented 3 other comparison lines, asking which one matched the original. The correct answer was completely obvious. There was no optical illusion, no trick photography. Yet, one by one, the 7 actors confidently gave the exact same wrong answer. When it was finally time for the real participant to speak, 3 out of every 4 people chose to ignore their own eyes and agree with the crowd's incorrect answer. When interviewed later, the participants confessed they knew the right answer all along. They simply could not bear the psychological discomfort of being the lone dissenting voice in the room. This experiment explains how mass hysteria, economic bubbles, the dot-com frenzy, and modern social media echo chambers function. We subconsciously assume that 1,000 people cannot possibly all be wrong. But history proves they can be, and they often are. Interestingly, the Asch experiment revealed a beautiful loophole. If just one single actor in the room broke ranks and gave the correct answer, the participants' conformity collapsed, and they found the courage to speak the truth. It only takes one voice of dissent to break the spell. When everyone around you is nodding in perfect, comfortable agreement, that is your cue to actively hunt for the person who disagrees. In our modern landscape, you can even use AI as your personal devil's advocate. If a popular consensus forms in your industry or social circle, prompt an AI engine with a specific command. Build the absolute strongest, most airtight argument proving that this consensus is dead wrong. You don't have to become a cynic who doubts reality itself, but you must remember that mass agreement is never a substitute for empirical proof. This brings us to the 4th distortion, which is uniquely modern. The dangerous temptation to completely outsource your brain to artificial intelligence. A fascinating study conducted by researchers at MIT split participants into 2 distinct groups to write analytical essays. The first group relied entirely on their own minds, logical reasoning, and traditional search engines. The second group was allowed to use ChatGPT. Predictably, the AI users finished significantly faster. However, neurological monitoring showed that the brains of the AI users exhibited drastically lower cognitive activity compared to the independent thinkers. Even more shocking, just a few minutes after completing the task, the researchers asked both groups to quote or recall a single key concept from the papers they had just produced. The independent thinkers remembered their arguments vividly. The AI group could not recall a single coherent line of the content they had just generated. By outsourcing the uncomfortable friction of critical thinking to an algorithm, their brains treated the information as completely disposable. When we let machines do our creating, analyzing, and synthesizing, our mental muscles actively atrophy. To prevent this intellectual decay, treat AI as a flawed, hyperactive assistant rather than an infallible oracle. When prompting, consistently enforce strict boundaries by adding two specific phrases to your inputs: be precise and please verify. Take it a step further by utilizing cross-engine auditing. Take the output generated by one language model, paste it into a competing model, and command it to ruthlessly critique the logic, fact-check the statistics, and uncover the biases of the first output. They are ultimately mathematical entities. It is your job to remain the supervisor. Yet, of all the distortions hijacking our minds, the fifth and final one is by far the most difficult to defeat because it requires you to fight the one person you trust implicitly: yourself. We rarely lie to ourselves maliciously. Instead, we want a specific narrative to be true so desperately that our brains quietly shut down our internal fact-checking systems. Psychologists refer to this as confirmation bias, coupled with emotional reasoning. Think about how often people stay in failing businesses, terrible financial investments, or toxic relationships simply because they have invested so much emotional energy into them. They confuse the intensity of their desires with objective reality. We get hopelessly trapped in our own self-deceptions because admitting we are wrong threatens our ego. The ultimate, most uncomfortable question a true critical thinker must ask themselves when facing any major decision is this: what am I actively refusing to see right now, simply because I need this story to be true? Today, the boundary between what is real and what is fabricated, what genuinely matters and what is just noise, has been completely blurred. When the cultural and technological fog gets this thick, your personal judgment is the only compass you have left. The solution is not to panic, nor is it to blindly reject progress. The solution is to slow down, invest heavily in your own cognitive independence, and master the mechanics of clear thinking. The world isn't going to clear up anytime soon, and navigating the future will require driving with extreme caution. The road ahead may be winding, complex, and deeply confusing, but if you refuse to outsource your mind, you will always find your way, and in the process, you will become scary intelligent.